Hi everybody, good afternoon. Today I'm here with Tracy and we're doing Women in Tech Speak Up on the topic of allyship and how to create strong ally connections. Now this is something that's quite close to both of our hearts because we've on one hand, or I'll talk for myself, on one hand I've had really strong allies as I've grown in my career. And on the other hand, I see there could have been so much more potential in designing stronger relationships with people, being really conscious about what I actually wanted to get out of it, and how that would also help the other person. So, Tracy, what's here for you as we start this discussion on allies? What comes up for you?
Yeah, for me, like just to kind of definitely echo what you've sort of said, like I've had some really great allies in my career, and I couldn't have gotten to where I got to without them, to be honest. And the number one topic that I really would want people to walk away with is the benefit of creating safe spaces for people.
Say
I
more.
think
What's
that's
important about that?
so for me, like a safe space. So like I've seen like a number of different variants of this, but to talk about what I experienced personally first was it was just really when a leader or manager of mine went out of their way to regularly set time aside where it was just one on one. And not only was I able to just talk about what's going on with me right now, but it was a space that we could share, and they would share what's going on with them and their lives and their work and their projects, and therefore like being like having an open discussion, having like a conversation that it's about the people, it's not just about the projects. And that really helped me open up and really helped me trust the other person to then go on and ask for bigger and better and scarier things, that there was a safe space there. And it was, I think that, okay, everybody would have like a team meeting and it's important for communication, but the one-on-one space is super important. I've also seen a lot in like the discussions that I had. I interviewed a lot of women back in the summer about what was really working for them in terms of like creating a safe environment for women, and it was groups as well. And I'm sure you've probably seen them as well, Sarah, like in your discussions and things. And obviously, I know you're doing that for your programs too. But basically, having a safe space where it's like-minded people come together to discuss challenges, to talk about sort of solutions, and for people, like-minded people, to come together and know that they're accepted and they can be comfortable and they can like all move each other forward.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to me when you say that is also like the next step, which is obviously the ERGs, and we've done this before. We're not going to go down this road again today, but I think this is another topic that keeps coming up as to something we need to actually touch on as to the power and also some of the limitations maybe of ERGs. But what kind of came out to me as you were talking was helping people design this safe space. And I think a lot of people struggle to understand actually, well, what do I need to ask for in order to be able to create these kind of relationships? And what I'm always saying to my clients is, what's your intention with either, like you're saying, going into a one-on-one session, or what's your intention with building this relationship? Because that's what it is, whether it's an ally or not, almost irrelevant. It's what's the relationship and how does it bring benefit to both parties? And you can actually get really conscious. I did a post on this yesterday about designing and redesigning relationships boldly. And we often hold back from doing this because we're scared of maybe upsetting somebody else or maybe having a difficult conversation. And yet, none of my clients have ever had pushback when they've gone to someone and said, please, can we redesign our relationship? I think we can work better together. People will generally go, oh, they're so shocked almost that somebody's making that request. But it could be anything as far as I'm concerned. So it could be, designing yourself or looking at your stakeholder map around the business and saying, who are the key people who I need support from and who I also have something to give to in terms of support. And that makes it powerful because then it's both ways. And quite often with allies or major stakeholders, sponsors, or whatever, having that one-on-one time and designing it in to say, I'd like us to meet because I think we can support each other with the kind of programs we're doing, speaking up for each other. So typical thing with women, as you know, is obviously other people speaking over them or not letting them finish or taking like their ideas and then explaining it further. But having somebody who's coming in at that point to say, hang on, can you let Tracy finish? I'd like to hear what she's got to say. Or yes, what Tracy just said is really interesting. What's here for everyone else? So almost like amplifying each other's voices. And this is actually quite often what we see men doing within the business, but they don't necessarily do it consciously. And it's something I think consciously we need to do as women within the business to ensure that there's that space, as you said, that safe space to have the conversation on one side in a very safe space, to then give you the confidence to take that into a bigger forum.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things kind of came up there for me when you were talking. First of all, is there's a wonderful book which I found very useful when I was joining a new company as a leader, and it's called The First 90 Days. And have you read it?
I haven't, but I've heard a lot about it.
It's really, really good, and I strongly recommend it for people if they are basically going to be joining a business as a leader. And it just complements exactly what Sarah's just said, in the sense of it is so important when you join a business that you identify the key stakeholders and you make time with them. Basically, that you start off as you mean to go on, and basically if you make that time one-to-one at the very early stages and you understand what they do, what they're looking for, what's their challenges at the very early stages, then you can basically kind of start to build that collaboration and build the safe spaces, even on a cross-functional team perspective. And that was exactly what I've done, and it was so successful for me to help me build those alliances at the beginning, to then they would become my circle of trust, which is definitely something that we've spoken about before. And then once you build that circle of trust, even from the beginning, then you're going to have someone have your back straight away, and it's going to help amplify your voices, as you say. It's so valuable, very useful.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really, there's a very uncomfortable feeling when you go into a business and start asking straight away, asking for people's time. It's like, do I really have permission? And just ask the question, I really like to develop a relationship with you. And it's something that's definitely people shy away from. And yet it is really important within a business to know where to go to for different things. So creating, like you're saying, a network within the business. Don't all have to be men. It can be anybody who you see around you, who, like you say, maybe you get some energy from. And also, just as powerfully, people who maybe you disagree with on a regular basis. Because if you can take those conversations to the next level and understand the disagreement, then, you will still disagree on things, but actually you're understanding the intention behind the disagreement. You're coming from different perspectives. It's actually an opportunity. Yeah. And I often say to people, look, when you're worried about asking someone for their time, for their individual time, well, it's as much a value of your time as it is a value of their time. And also, what's the gift that you're giving them with this offer, with like trying to build your relationship? Because there's always an opportunity for both parties, always. And this is something that I kind of want to amplify. And also, when you notice behaviors, for example, that you don't like maybe within the business or you feel very uncomfortable with, maybe the first step is not calling it out directly, which I would advocate, but doing it in an open way. But the first step might be for you to, have a one-on-one with that person later and just say, when you said that, it made me feel, disrespected, or it made me feel small, unheard, whatever that is for you. Because by owning it and by saying it, you're actually bringing their attention to it. And I'll give you an example, which is probably quite funny. I'm not sure this is the best example, but whilst we were struggling to have children, so when I was going through multiple miscarriage, I basically was trying to change jobs out of engineering and to do something different. I wanted a different challenge. It was more to kind of focus on something new, so I wasn't just focusing on the whole thing that was going on in my private life. But I remember we're going to one of the senior directors and asking to sit down with them after a meeting. We were talking, and they basically said, look, I'm looking for a new job. I'd really like to get into the service side of the business. I think it'd be really interesting. These are the strengths I think, or the skills that I think I can bring. And what I heard, and I'm sure this is not what he said, but what I heard from him was, well, you're just jumping ship because it's got difficult, you know, you're going to do this if you come into my part of the business. And I was so shocked and so taken aback. I actually started crying. And, you know, I very rarely did this at work, but it was such an emotional time for me. And the guy basically went, oh my God, I'm so sorry. He said, I've done it again. I've gone one step too far. And I opened up to him. We had a conversation, and you know what? He became one of my biggest allies. And we could play that conversation out. And even like before he went off and retired, he came to me and we were having a conversation. We had a bit of a chuckle about that because he said it was a bit of a turning point for him to recognize, actually, I need to deal with this differently because I don't know what's going on for somebody behind. And actually, my intention was to be supportive and to challenge you. And actually, what came out was quite confrontational for you, which pushed you over the edge. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. That, yeah, it sounds like that would have been a really difficult time. But I think that what I'm sort of taking from that is we're all people.
Yeah.
We're all people, and I think that that's, and I know we've talked about this before, and connection on a human level is so important to create so many relationships. And it's so interesting that you had like a moment of vulnerability, basically, and it sparked something else, because it's basically creating a deeper relationship. And that's, for me, that's what it's really all about. And for me, like, you know, it's also so important to carry those relationships with you as well, because we go off and do different things, but that person is going to always be your ally and is always going to back you up, like regardless of what you're doing, just because you had a moment together. And I think that for me as well, it's having human moments helped me in the past look at a leader that I had in a very different way as well, because he had some things going on in his background and everybody knew about it, but like he had like a really poorly relative, and like he was having to care for them. And you know, I was initially very intimidated by this leader. He was an incredibly strong, powerful leader, but at the end of the day, he was still a human and he had other things going on. And so like I was able to kind of enter the relationship, like the professional working relationship, with compassion. And it for me, it makes it something so different. It's so different. And I was able to go to him. It was an incredibly challenging time in my life, and an incredibly difficult project and place to work. And so, you know, without that relationship, without that connection, I would have jumped ship a bit earlier, to be quite honest.
Yeah, you're bringing something up which is about obviously vulnerability, and we try and shy away, and we're trying to be professional at work, and we're trying to cover our emotions, and yet we're human beings. We're emotional beings, and actually, when we do get emotional, it actually shows we care. So not from a point of view as like all the time being emotional, but actually being aware of our emotions and almost allowing it to influence or to be present as part of a professional conversation. You know, there are certain emotions that are accepted, like anger and other things, and yet there are emotions like obviously me getting upset and crying with this guy, which are, you know, very much taboo in business, and yet they tell us an awful lot about actually what happens, because, you know, we're emotional about things we care about. If your employees are emotional, it means that they care about what they're doing, or there's something else going on potentially for them.
Yeah.
And uncovering that, I mean, whether that's an ally, whoever within your business, it's like that comes back to that when someone overreacts to something you say and you recognize it, you know, asking what's there for them, what's going on, because, you know, this recognition, this visibility, there must be something else, and allowing them that space. And like you say, it comes back to creating a safe space again. You know, it's about having that relationship, designing that relationship that you can ask for things. And it's so important in whatever context within business, as well as, the whole of the rest of our lives, creating supportive relationships.
I think I definitely want to point out something that kind of came up for me there was about awareness. So I think that what's really important, as you say, it's really important for leaders to have awareness and have that kind of emotional intelligence to recognize that someone is behaving in a way that is not not normal for them, or is sort of like a little bit different for them. So leaders need to have that awareness in other people, but also in themselves, about how to kind of empathize and how to kind of build that space to allow people to continue to step forward, basically. So I think that, yeah, compassion is important, empathy is important, awareness is important.
Yeah, totally. So how would you suggest that people deal with something when they've been triggered? So how can you turn an event like that into a relationship, or into, potentially creating an ally with that person? Because that's almost the best case scenario, isn't it? You're helping them reflect on actually what it is without making them wrong for where they are today. But actually with an intention to create something that's useful for both of you.
Yeah, I would say ensure that you prioritize one-to-one private conversations, and just ensure that you listen. Like, listen to each other, like engage in active listening to ensure that you're really paying attention to what the person is saying, but also what are they needing. And this, for me, this is like an important part of building these relationships, because it's all about, I'm sharing what I need, you share what you need, and you work together to kind of see where this overlaps and see where you can kind of fight for a common goal.
Yeah, totally. Because one of the things that I think also helps is kind of making it personal, like especially where if maybe you saw someone else being triggered by something that somebody said, and actually being the leader to have that conversation, to be the one to actually like pull it up and say, actually, I was aware when that happened that the other person retreated, they felt uncomfortable, and so I just want to bring it up so we can have this conversation, because I think it's not just about when we feel uncomfortable. It's actually, like you say, it's the emotional intelligence of recognizing what's going on in the room. And if we want to create businesses that thrive, we've got to have more courageous conversations. And a bit like you're saying, making it personal about you and owning it, and like this, like non-judgmental, as to say, this is what I felt or I saw. What was there for you? How did it feel?
Yeah.
Because if you can connect with the feeling, I think that's where the change actually comes, is the recognition. Because I think quite often we just carry on walking. We don't even stop to reflect, to look, to challenge ourselves.
Yeah, I think definitely to kind of echo that, I would say without judgment is the key thing here. And then also, don't make any assumptions, because I think that if there's someone that's been triggered, that it can be too many opportunities to assume what's happened there. And we are all people, we all have lives outside of work, and therefore it's really, really important to go in with a level of curiosity and kind of like fact finding, as opposed to pointing fingers and assuming something which isn't right. There's always a bigger story.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that saying, like what we're thinking in our heads is different to what comes out of our mouths. What somebody hears and how they complete the story as in their own heads as to actually what that is, again, is different. And this is why communication generally is so damn hard. And yet, you're right, it's about reflection, it's about listening, it's about creating space, it's about curiosity, and owning what we feel. And it just drives the conversation to a whole new level.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it kind of turns it into a slightly kind of coaching conversation generally, but like, because it's generally open, it's curious, it's non-judgment space. And it's a skill. These skills are so important for leaders, but there's a very common parallel.
I'm laughing because I often say I've gone from being a leader who coaches to a coach who leads, because the skill sets are so similar in terms of how we support people, because that's what both roles are. They're supporting other people to thrive. You're trying to get the best out of other people, supporting them. And whether you've got a title of a leader or not doesn't stop you being a leader and having these kind of conversations. And it's one of the things I think we've got to see more of in businesses, is holding one another accountable, but in a brave and a courageous way, in terms of, like you say, non-judgmental, opening up conversations, curiosity. And so, yeah, not advocating everyone goes off and does coaching qualifications, but there's an awful big benefit to being able to do it as a leader, definitely.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Okay, cool. So what's your one tip for people who either want to become an ally to a woman or to another underrepresented, employee within their business, or maybe your one tip for women to go and actually ask that question?
I would say, in terms of people being allies, I would say listen, don't assume.
Okay, listen, don't assume. And your tip
Yes.
for women?
So there was for women who want to advocate for other women. Sorry.
No, for women who want to go and ask someone to become an ally, or want to go and build that relationship.
I would. The tip would be get people one-to-one. Don't ask in a group. The one-to-one, like the 5-minute chats, the coffee machine, the water cooler kind of conversations. Get people one-to-one. You can really learn the human behind it, and that's, for me, that's so important.
That's something that just came up for me, is actually, you don't have to call it an ally, you don't have to call it a mentor, you don't have to call it anything. You're just having a conversation with someone and designing a relationship which serves. Because sometimes when you go and say, right, I'd really like you to be my ally, or I'd really like you to be my mentor, people kind of get a bit taken aback. Whereas actually just organically growing a relationship is super important. So you don't even need to use the words, but go in with the intention to build a relationship with that person.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, when I used that first 90 days book, I would say, like, I really just wanted to get to know you a bit better and what's going on, and I just wanted to pick your brains about the business.
Like that.
And just start from there, and just start it as a completely genuine, curious, open conversation. And for me, I didn't really go in with an agenda. It was just really to understand more about the person and what they're going through.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Tracy, for this conversation. I hope any of you watching it's provided you with some little tips and ideas on what you can maybe do differently, how to engage people. And we'll keep doing these kind of conversations. So you've got ideas or something you want us to have a conversation about, which maybe you're struggling with a bit, or there's something that's frustrating you in the business, or you think there's not enough attention being paid to, just kind of in terms of visibility, then ask the question. Tracy and I are here, and we're more than happy to have these conversations, try and help other people start these conversations in a business context. So thank you very much, Tracy. Lovely to see you again. Take care.
As always.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.